Soak up the rags, spark up the mask, light up the night and I never look back. I am the altar, you are the monster, I am the entity, I am the haunter. Fight with no water, fight with no water, bring me the leg, I won't choke on the water. I am the author, you are the paper, rip you apart, leave the blood on the razor. Motherfucker, I am the product, they never feeling my feelings, I run upon them in the middle of the night and I kill them. I drill a hole in the middle of the fit of whatever mistake, tell me shit, I don't listen, I'm burning up with the witches. Always been the same and I'll never change.
The Straw Hat Pirates sail on the sea, listening to New Genesis on a tone dial, though Jinbe doesn't recognize. Usopp tells him that it's famous around the world, and Brook adds that it makes your heart beat wildly with its melody. Meanwhile, Utah stands on a cliff, staring out into the ocean and thinking about her childhood. 12 years ago, Luffy walks through Fuchsia Village, practicing his punches. He pushes Whoop's slap back, knocking over a fruit stand, and the mayor tells him to go help out the other villagers instead of wasting time, but Luffy refuses. The shopkeeper gives Luffy a bag of fruits, and Luffy leaves, heading off into the mountain. There, he runs into a monkey who attempts to take the fruit. Luffy offers the fruit if the monkey can beat him in a fight, and they begin to spar. In the end, Luffy wins the fight, and the monkey walks off in shame, but Luffy offers him half the fruit, and they eat together. Later, Luffy is chased by a boar, and ends up falling off a cliff into the ocean. However, he is pulled out of the water by Garp, who lectures him about sinking in the ocean, stating that he can't become a marine if he can't swim. Meanwhile, out at sea, the Red Hair Pirates are sailing with a young Utea on board. Shanks gives her jewelry from a treasure chest, and she puts it on, preparing to sing a song for the assembled crew. However, she notices that Shanks isn't watching and goes to see what he's looking at. She finds him looking inside a chest containing a fruit, but he refuses to give it to her despite her being his daughter. She admonishes him for being a cheapskate, but he denies it and points to the Goa Kingdom, where the crew will be staying for a while. Back on the island, Luffy talks to himself about not becoming a Navy soldier and states that he's going to leave the island and do something big. He sees the Red Hair Pirates approaching the shore, wondering who they are, and he runs to the dock to meet them. Luffy tells them to leave the island, but Utah challenges him to force them out, proclaiming herself Shanks' daughter. However, Shanks tells her to leave Luffy alone, stating that they're not here to fight. Sometime later, the Red Hair Pirates sit in Party's bar, and Luffy declares that he wants to be a pirate, though Shanks admonishes him. Luffy asks to try out for the crew again, and plays a shell game with Shanks, but Shanks cheats and Luffy isn't allowed on the crew. Luffy tries to reverse the trick on Shanks, hiding the coin in his mouth the same way, and swallows it when he's confronted. Suddenly, Yuta enters the bar, telling Luffy not to get too close to Shanks in a tacky outfit. She reveals that she's a diva, and the musician of the Red Hair Pirates. The crew clear out the bar, leaving only a single table with a spotlight in the middle, and Yuta begins singing Where the Wind Blows. The song impresses Luffy, who states that he can sing too, and he begins singing the Moron song. However, his singing annoys Yuta, and she runs out of the bar screaming. She says that he's off pitch, and his singing will make the crew's IQ drop, though he disagrees. When Yuta cries to Shanks, he tells them to be friends since they're the same age, though Yuta disagrees since she's 9 and Luffy is 7. Shanks asks Luffy to show Yuta around Fuchsia Village, and the kids head into the mountains. Luffy challenges Yuta to climb a cliff, and after a short back and forth, they begin racing up it. They reach the top at the same time, and Luffy says that he's impressed with her climbing abilities, but Yuta says that there's nothing Luffy could beat her at. He gets angry, and they begin competing. They have a height contest, a cuteness contest, and an arm wrestling contest, all of which Yuta wins. They then have a screaming competition, which Yuta wins by projecting her voice. Luffy challenges Yuta to another competition, but she says that he's just a kid who hasn't realized that the most fun place in the world is inside yourself. Later, the two head back to an abandoned windmill, arguing about Shanks' merits and demerits. They climb to the top and look out over the town, though Yuta says she's seen more beautiful scenes out at sea. Back in the present day, Yuta states she's going to make her dream come true, and continues to look out over the ocean. Yuta sits in Party's bar, complaining to her father about Luffy's training methods, while Makino thanks her for playing with him. However, Yuta replies that she's just protecting Shanks by stopping Luffy from annoying him. At that moment, Luffy enters the bar, asking Shanks to let him join his crew, though Shanks swiftly declines and Luffy starts to throw a tantrum. Yuta then forces Luffy out of the bar, stating that they were supposed to train at sea. Once they leave, Shanks tells Makino that he's planning Fuchsia Village soon, though he'll be back. Out at sea, the two kids paddle in barrels, racing to a rock. However, when they arrive, they realize that it's actually the Lord of the Coast, and begin paddling away as fast as they can. Back on land, Luffy tells Utah that he's their local sea monster, and Utah tells him that Shanks would easily defeat it. They begin talking about becoming pirates, and Utah asks Luffy what his goal is once he's become one. She reveals that she dreams of traveling around the world with Shanks and bringing joy with her singing. Luffy then reveals that his goal is to travel the world, meeting a variety of people and trying a variety of food. Later, as the red hair pirates prepare to leave the island, Shanks brings Luffy off the ship. Utah had found him hiding on the ship, stating that if Shanks said no, then he's not allowed on board. As the crew leaves, Luffy swears to be on board next time. Eventually, the red hair pirates return. As Luffy goes to greet them, everyone refuses to acknowledge him, and he decides to go ask Utah what's going on. However, he soon runs into Shanks, who tells him that Utah left the ship to become a singer, to Luffy's shock. He refuses to believe it, stating that Utah would never leave Shanks and that something must have happened. However, Shanks doesn't respond, and Luffy runs off, crying. Sometime later, news of Elige's destruction spread across the world, with a reported 100% mortality rate and Shanks being held responsible. As the news travels, Garp and Sengoku state that the destruction was connected to Top Musica, and that Shanks revealed his true nature. They end their discussion by saying that Roger would be disappointed in him. Back in Fuchsia Village, Beckman asks Luffy to forgive Shanks, telling him that there are some things that people just can't talk about. However, Luffy just runs out the mountain, thinking about his time with Utah. Suddenly, he's attacked by mountain bandits, and they continuously beat him until sundown. He's eventually saved by Beckman, who brings him back to the village. The next day, Luffy enters Party's bar and asks to join Shanks' crew, but is swiftly rejected. He sits with the red hair pirates, telling Shanks that he won't ask what happened because it's his and Utah's business. Meanwhile, in Mary Geoise, the five elders discuss Shanks. Back in the present day, Usopp tells Luffy that Utah is putting on a live performance, and Nami adds that it's her first one. Luffy decides to go, and the crew head for Elige. On the island, Utah prepares for the concert, stating that a new Genesis is going to begin. The movie begins with a narration: wealth, fame, power. With the beginning of the Great Pirate Era, many pirates were able to flourish and explore the world. However, in turn, this also resulted in the suffering of many citizens. We get a reel showing recordings of several citizens around the world mentioning how much they've suffered from the violence of pirates, and how much they've lost because of them, begging to the one watching to help them. We pan out to see that these are all comments that Utah has been receiving through Den Den Mushi from her viewers, as she contemplates all the people suffering while she snacks on a mushroom. Utah prepares herself as thousands of people are gathering just outside at Elige Island, where the new Genesis Live concert is about to begin. The Straw Hats are cooking a barbecue in one of the special seats in the front rows, with some of them explaining to get the audience caught up that Utah is the world's greatest and most famous singer, with Brook saying that he can't even compare as Soul King. Utah has attained massive fame by streaming her songs via Den Den Mushi. However, now she is performing for the first time on a live stage in front of an audience, and thousands of people from all over the world came to support her. The lights go dark on stage and Utah appears, with the crowd chanting UTA, so Utah begins to sing Shinji Dai New Era, the first of her songs. As her musical number ensues, a gigantic birdcage appears around everyone in the concert hall, and soon after cute animals and objects appear around the air, as if everyone was living inside of a music video, which some realize is likely coming from Utah's devil fruit powers. These combine to make an incredible concert experience as everyone becomes immersed in Utah's music with all the special effects of her powers. We see that people from all over the world are watching her concert too on Den Den Mushi livestream, including Whoop Slap and the others at Fuchsia Village, the cooks at the Barity, Drum Island, people at Sabati on the same screens they watched the Summit War on, etc. Finally, as her musical number ends, Utah greets the audience and mentions how she wants to usher in a new era that will put a stop to the violence of pirates, in a world where everyone will be happy for all of eternity. She declares how today is the day she'll start this new era and deliver joy to everyone through her music. As Utah was performing, Luffy seemed to recognize her, so as the song ends, he swings up on stage and looks at her up close, exclaiming how he knows her. People are surprised to see someone jumped on stage but recognize his straw hat and the guy on stage as the 5th Emperor. Utah takes a second and notices Luffy's face as her hair perks up, so the two tearfully embrace each other in a hug. Sanji grits his teeth in jealousy. Luffy's crew is surprised that he knows Utah so personally that they would hug, but Luffy casually explains that it's because she's Shanks' daughter, causing the entire auditorium to go in shock. Utah is mildly annoyed that Luffy dropped that fact when she was trying to keep it a secret, but just dismisses it as it's not too big of a deal. A group of pirates called the Jellyfish Pirates start moving from the audience to close in on Utah, claiming that given her fame, they can gain a lot off of kidnapping her. After Luffy drops that she is Shanks' daughter, they're even more pleased, as they can hold hostage someone who is incredibly close and important to one of the Yonko to leverage things out of him. As they surround her, Utah seems fairly unfazed by their threats, but as soon as they try to get in closer, suddenly Charlotte Oven jumps in from the crowd and sends some of them flying with his Heat Denasi attack. Oven pulls out a mirror from where Broly comes out and they announce that Big Mom has shown interest in kidnapping Utah. Luffy and the others jump in to protect Utah, with the Straw Hats showing a bunch of their moves with a lot of cool animation shots. The jellyfish pirates are easily disposed of by them. Jinbe creates a giant shark made of water and rides against Oven, but Oven negates the attack with his heat, so Frankie jumps in to clash against him. However, just as things are getting heated, Utah raises her hand asking everyone to stop. She thanks Luffy for the help, but she asks him to let her handle things. Utah asks the Big Mom pirates and the jellyfish pirates to stop being pirates and just get along together and have fun with the joy of singing, saying she's willing to forgive their previous bad actions if they accept to live in peace together from now on. The pirates obviously dismiss this idea, with Oven stating how there is no peace in this world, but Utah accepts their refusal and begins singing Watashi wa Saikyo, I'm the best. As she does, colorful objects and effects appear around her again, just like in a music video. Utah transforms into her armor from the trailers, interestingly enough. She dances around the arena, using music notes to attack and strings in the shape of music sheet to entrap her enemies. Within a second, she instantly defeats Oven and Broly by wrapping them up in strings, as well as the jellyfish pirates, hanging all of them up on a music sheet in the air. Utah starts flying around the stage as she keeps singing while Luffy is really impressed that she's gotten that much stronger. The audience is glad to see that despite being Shanks' daughter and hesitating for a second, she's still on the side of good and willing to defeat evil pirates. After the song is over, we cut to Whole Cake Island, where Big Mom, sporting a new outfit, is watching the live show alongside Perospero, Smoothie, Citron, Cinnamon, Amande, Nostort, and Flampe. Big Mom is impressed Utah was able to stand up to Oven that easily, but is now even more interested in capturing her, not just for her devil fruit powers, but also for her connections to Shanks. Perospero also mentions how this would be a good opportunity to get some payback against the Straw Hats given her connections with Luffy as well. Someone appears from behind them and says they'll go to Alegia Island since they want to save their little sister. This is shown to be Katakuri. Meanwhile, we cut to Mary Geowise, where the Gorosei are observing the concert as well, though they have muted the audio for some reason. They are intrigued that Utah is the daughter of Shanks, but mention that the Cipher Pole has already confirmed this fact. The sword-wielding Gorosei mentions that this would mean she's from the Figureland family. In Japanese it's Huiga Rando, which could vary depending on the translation. This would imply that this is due to her being Shanks' daughter, implying even if not fully confirming that Shanks is of the Figureland family, which could even be his surname. The way this is framed could potentially also imply they are referring to a celestial dragon family, particularly when tied with information later in the movie, but this isn't really stated directly in any way, so we can only speculate about it. They also refer to Utah as another bud of revolution that poses a threat during this era, and how she is particularly dangerous because the masses all support her and believe in her. More than anything, though, they are concerned by Utah's abilities and her connection with a weapon from ancient times seemingly not related to the three ancient weapons from the main story, but still considered a weapon of equal power to those. Capable of destroying the world that lies dormant in Alegia Island, called Tot Musica, literally meaning all music in some languages. We cut to Sakazuki at New Marineford, who is also concerned about the situation, summoning 30 marine battleships, basically the equivalent to 3 buster calls, to completely annihilate Utah and the threat she poses. Kizaru wonders if it's overkill to send so many ships, but Sakazuki tells him not to underestimate Utah's power. Kizaru and Fujitora head to take care of Utah alongside the fleet. Meanwhile, Utah takes advantage of break time in her concert to talk a bit with Luffy. She and Luffy always used to partake in duels together, with Luffy claiming he's held a 183-win record, though Utah is certain Luffy is misremembering because she's the one who holds that record. The two decide to settle another duel, a challenge where they have to finish food as quickly as they can before a bull Utah created runs them over. Luffy is confident about being able to eat faster, but Utah magically creates a giant mug of orange juice and gives it to Luffy to distract him, just like Shanks did in Chapter 1, which is a nice reference, keeping him busy enough for her to finish and to be hit by the bull. Luffy falls into water, but Utah pulls him out really easily with her powers, apologizing because she didn't take into account that he's a pirate now. Utah teases Luffy by telling him you lost again, as she does a cute pose where she gropes her fingers as she smiles. Utah takes advantage of winning the duel and asks Luffy where Shanks is getting up close in his face, but Luffy says he doesn't know. She brings up the hat, but Luffy says Shanks simply left it with him before he left. As Nami inquires about Luffy and Utah's relationship, We get a flashback of Luffy and Utah during their childhood and the time they spent together. We see how they used to engage in silly duels of all types for a long while, showing us a duel just like the one they did right now in the present, where Utah won by offering Luffy orange juice and distracting him enough to win. Makino tried to stop them, but Shanks decided to just watch since it's just a duel. As she won, Utah teased Luffy again with the same cute pose, but Luffy got mad that he lost and tried to battle it out with Utah. As the two readied to punch each other by flailing their arms in circles, Shanks came in to stop them both by hitting them on the heads with his sword's guard and asked them to get along. As the two kids kept arguing, Utah pulled the fact that she's Shanks' favorite child and hugged his leg, but Luffy got jealous and hugged Shanks' leg as well. Shanks let the two kids climb on his back as they kept bickering like siblings. Luffy brought up how it's odd that Utah calls Shanks by his first name, but she mentions how she calls him that way because she's not just her father but also the captain she admires. Luffy asked Shanks again to bring him to sea like he did so often at the start of the manga, but Shanks refused, explaining that Utah is different because she was already experienced in sailing since she was a kid, compared to Luffy who had no experience. Utah agreed and proudly declared herself as the musician of the red-haired pirates. Everyone gathered around for her to perform, so Utah began to sing Kaz no Yuki, Where the Wind Blows, where everyone ended up transported into a world of memories and emotions. Suddenly the song stopped though, as Luffy woke up, realizing he was asleep all along. However, as he looked around, he noticed everyone else was mysteriously asleep too. He noticed Utah also fell asleep herself, so he decided to begin singing himself instead. Nami wonders about how Luffy and Utah got separated though, but suddenly Utah seems to freeze up. Luffy tries really hard to jog his memory, but he recalls and explains that one day 12 years ago, as Shanks' crew returned, everyone was awfully silent and refused to talk to Luffy. At that point, Luffy dismissed them for being so aloof and said that at least Utah would greet him warmly. However, Utah was not on the ship that day. As Shanks disembarked, Luffy asked him what went wrong, but Shanks commented how Utah decided to leave somewhere to devote herself to becoming a songstress, assuring him that she would be fine. Back to the present, Utah asks what Luffy's doing at the moment, which of course Luffy replies he's a pirate, adding that he'll become the Pirate King. Utah freezes up for a moment and starts shaking, but she tries to regain her composure as she asks Luffy to stop being a pirate. She says he and his crew can all just hang out with her on this island and share in the joy for all of eternity. Luffy, however, just walks away and ignores her, as Utah grows impatient and angrier. Luffy simply says that it's only fair Utah should do what she wants, and he should do what he wants. He says he's glad to have seen her again and bids her goodbye, but Utah refuses and states that she absolutely can't let him go. Utah shows a smirk on her face as her eyes begin to look more deranged. Nami tells Utah to calm down, that even if they like her music, staying for all of eternity is a bit too much, but Utah pushes her away with a music note. Sanji tries to save Nami, but Utah captures the two of them into a music sheet, just like she did with Oven, and hangs them up for the audience to see. Utah begins singing Gakko Backlight, sprouting two wings with her powers as she summons a horde of music note knights with her powers who start fighting the Straw Hats. Luffy gets in his gear second pose to fight Utah, but then realizes something and stops. He pulls his hat down, imitating Shanks, and says there are some fights not worth fighting. Utah gets angry but tells Luffy to suit himself as she unleashes her powers on the other Straw Hats. They all fight back, but little by little, despite showing some opposition, are very easily folded in front of Utah, who uses her strings to stick them all to the music sheet alongside Nami and Sanji. Luffy finally decides to try fighting back when his crewmates are in danger, but Utah uses her strings to tie him up and throw him on stage, where Luffy is covered in water that some viewers dump on him. Utah asks the crowd if these evil pirates should be punished, as the crowd chants UTA in unison, wanting revenge for the pirates that destroyed their lives, even if Usopp begs her that Luffy doesn't commit crimes like that. Utah does the same cute pose on Luffy again, saying you lost again. Among the crowd, an undercover Helmeppo tries to go after Luffy, but Kobe says not to worry. Sure enough, before Utah can attack Luffy, suddenly a barrier is erected around Luffy, and Bartolomeo, who was also a fan of Utah and showed up at the concert, mentions how he is happy to help his boss out. The two of them then suddenly vanish as a rock appears and falls in their place. Away from the stage, on another side of Elegia Island closer to the city, Luffy and Barto suddenly appear. Turns out that it was Law who saved them with his powers. Barto mocks Law and says how he's a closet Idol fan, but Law says he only showed up to chaperone someone else, as Bepo appears in full Idol fan gear and, of course, immediately apologizes. The four of them begin moving away to safety as Utah appears and follows after them with a music-designed tank and an army of her followers in tow. Among them, Kobe, Helmeppo, and Blueno from CP0 have infiltrated, who were undercover at the concert to assess Utah's threats. The the two of them are concerned with. The fact they are rivals, being from Sword and CPAG 0, but they decide to work together given the importance of the crisis. Kobe asks Blueno if they can rely on his Diwa Diwa no Mai powers, but Blueno mentions how they are limited by his stamina, so he can't go too crazy with them beyond a certain limit. The island is suddenly swarmed with music note knights, who are looking all over for Luffy in the air. As Luffy's team seeks shelter, the mysterious man Gordon suddenly appears and invites them to take refuge in a ruined church. He introduces himself as the former king of Elygia. Barto is surprised he can be a king when the island is in ruins, but Law explains how Elygia was once known as the world's capital of music, until a certain pirate came 12 years ago and annihilated all on the island overnight. Utah, who had been left behind, was then raised by Gordon, the sole survivor, to become the best singer there is, but Utah was in a really bad mental state due to a certain trauma from her past and struggled to find any motivation. However, one day 3 years ago, Utah found a bunch of discarded Den Den Mushi at the shore. Curiously, on those Den Den Mushi are 3 letters SSG, or Super Science Group. Utah then decided to use those Den Den Mushi to broadcast herself to the whole world, which brought hope back again into her life as she saw how much her music helped people. At the same time, though, it exposed her to how much some suffered because of pirates all around the world, which led to Utah developing hatred for pirates on top of her past trauma. Gordon, however, gets mad because Luffy is playing around with a pile of rubble trying to form a mountain rather than listening to him. Gordon pleads Luffy to help stop Utah since he's so close to her, but as Law tries to think of a plan, he is bothered by Beepo's noises once again. He, however, realizes Beepo has been turned into a chibi-like mascot who keeps making noises and saying his name like a Pokemon. Utah suddenly bursts into the room, and it turns out she's the one who transformed him with her powers. Utah steals Luffy's straw hat from him, calling it a symbol of piracy, with Luffy asking in turn just what went on with Shanks for her to act like this. Utah, however, snaps as she orders Luffy to not mention Shanks' name anymore and tries to capture him, but Law takes him and Bartolomeo away with his abilities to save them once again. Utah is angry, but just tells her followers to hunt after them, as it'll be a fun game. Utah apologizes to Gordon, who was left behind with Beepo, for not telling him about the live concert she threw. Gordon says the concert isn't the problem, but mentions how he's realized her true plan and begs her to stop, but Utah traps him in a music sheet. Gordon tells her he's just concerned because there's no way the government will sit back and do nothing. Utah, however, dismisses it with a smile and says she can handle them no problem, as she brings out a music sheet. The music sheet is very old. Gordon suddenly grows pale and tells her in a panic that she mustn't awaken it at any costs, but Utah is angry that Gordon hid this music sheet away, meaning he didn't trust her, so she just dismisses his pleas as she walks away. Luffy wants to go back to Utah to get his hat back, but Law says they must think of a plan. Bartolomeo encases Luffy in a barrier ball to make sure he is protected from Utah's powers or an ambush at all costs, but as they roll around in the barrier, they accidentally fall off a cliff and are catapulted far away. Luffy gets motion sick by all the spinning, but they end up crashing by the piers. Meanwhile, Kobe makes use of Blueno's powers to rescue the Straw Hats and teaches them the trick to break free from the music sheets, which is to play the respective note they are assigned to. Oven pleads to save them too and agrees to cooperate with the Marines for their freedom. Meanwhile, at the church, Gordon does the same and manages to break free of Utah's powers thanks to making Chibi Beepa play the right note. Back at the pier, Luffy is shocked to see that the Thousand Sunny has mysteriously disappeared, meaning they can't escape the island, but in its place is Sunny-kun, a small anthropomorphic version of the Sunny that has been transformed by Utah's powers into a mascot. Bartolomeo finds it odd, however, that no Marines have showed. However, we then cut to a different scenario where the island is somehow surrounded with Marine ships and the weather is stormy, unlike how it was sunny in the previous scene. Mysteriously, the Straw Hats, Law, Barto, Kobe, Blueno, etc. are all sleeping at the arena, at complete odds with the scenario we saw before. Clearly, something is going on. As Bartolomeo and Luffy reunite with Law, Kobe then shows up in front of them with Blueno's powers. Law is surprised he was able to find them, but Kobe mentions how he has very good observation haki. Kobe then explains the intel the government has on Utah's fruit, elaborating that she ate the Utah no Mai Song fruit, a fruit that allows her to entrap all those who hear her music into a virtual dream world that she has full control over, basically allowing her to manipulate it as if it were a music video. This virtual dream world is a parallel world identical to the normal one, but exists on a separate parallel plane where Utah can modify its properties at will. As explained above, she can basically affect anything in real time as if it were a music video, making her practically omnipotent within her world. Her powers, as we see them, include being able to generate items out of thin air, transform people into cute chibi mascots, trap people in music sheets, summon music note knights, and attack people with music note-like attacks. though she can only control reality within range of her vicinity. She can also negate most attacks like bullets or impacts too. This explains why she was able to overwhelm so many fighters so easily, because from the second the concert started, all the people on the island were entrapped in her dimension when the birdcage appeared by hearing her singing voice. However, the important thing is that only the consciousnesses of those affected travel to the virtual world, while their real bodies remain in the real world, but asleep. The body of anyone who has been trapped within the dream world can be freely manipulated by Utah in the real world while they sleep, allowing her to command all the bodies of those she trapped like an army of sleeping puppets, while their consciousnesses are trapped in a virtual world that they can't leave. Furthermore, you know how it goes, you die in the game, you die in real life, so people affected have to be careful they don't die either in the virtual world or that their bodies are killed in the real world while they're asleep. Luffy mentions that, oh yeah, that's how Utah's powers work, as she already had her devil fruit back when they were kids, hence why they all fell asleep when she sang, but the others get angry at him for not bringing it up before. Mentions that there has to be a weakness to the devil fruit, and Blueno affirms that indeed all devil fruits have one weakness or another. Just like his Dio no Mai, the Utah no Mai requires a lot of stamina to use, so it's hard to be kept continuously. Furthermore, every time the user falls asleep, all the people that were trapped in the dream world are released. However, Utah has managed to find a way to circumvent this weakness. Utah has been consuming a drug known as the insomnia mushroom, the same that Sanji found among his ingredients, a mushroom that stops someone from falling asleep when eaten. Since Utah has been eating them since before the live concert, she can't fall asleep, essentially trapping everyone within her dream world forever. However, the mushroom has the side effect that it starts affecting one's sanity after a while due to sleep deprivation, and continuous consumption leads to the body weakening from the lack of sleep, eventually causing death. Law is relieved to hear that, because it means they will be able to break free if she dies, but Luffy is mad because he doesn't want Utah to die. However, Kobe mentions the grim reality that if the user of this fruit dies while their powers are active, then everyone remains trapped in the virtual world forever. This is in reality Utah's true master plan, as she wanted to use the mushrooms to keep everyone trapped within the virtual world and eventually die so they could all live away from violent pirates and the troubles of the government to get along in this world of joy and happiness forever. Of course, this is a very naive goal, but all the comments Utah has received across the years caused her to become obsessed with making this idea a reality. Luffy and the others are concerned by this turn of events, but Kobe says he sent the Straw Hats to investigate the archives of Elijah Castle to find some way to escape this world, so Luffy feels relieved since he can count on his crew. Meanwhile, in the real world, Utah is by herself in the music stage as somber rain falls down, while everyone around her is asleep on the ground, trapped in her world. The Marines finally arrive as Manga is shocked to see everyone asleep, wondering if they are all dead, but Utah reassures him they're all just asleep. Utah is carrying a basket with Luffy's straw hat in it and a bunch of insomnia mushrooms, but is completely unfazed by all the Marines around her as she seems to be starting to lose her grip on reality as she shakily bites into a mushroom. Fujitora recognizes the smell of the insomnia mushrooms and catches onto Utah's plan, asking her to release everyone, but Utah refuses. Fujitora realizes Utah won't listen to reason and sees himself forced to resort to violence, but Utah isn't afraid of even the admirals as she can just trap them in her world, so she begins to sing. However, all the Marines put on visors with a red light that shield their sight and plug their ears, which makes them immune to Utah's powers. Utah is still fairly unfazed though, as she knows she can just use those who are asleep, exclaiming how it's already too late as Kobe jumps in and begins fighting the admiral. Utah then starts performing Utakata Lullaby, Fleeting Lullaby, causing the civilians to swarm onto the Marines. Fujitora tells his men to not hurt the civilians, but many of them begin to take off the visors from the Marines, causing more of them to fall to her music. Blueno, Oven, and many others begin to hunt down the Marines, as they become overwhelmed and even Fujitora is kept at bay. Law appears behind Manga and sends him flying into the water below, while Fujitora is forced to get serious and start slashing his own men, remaining one of the only not to be affected by her powers as he fights to keep his visor on while Utah psychedelically sings away. On the scene, Khalifa looks from afar on top of a tower and realizes that Utah is still broadcasting her songs to the live streams all around the world, affecting anyone who is hearing her songs regardless of where they are. All across the world, all those that were watching the live stream begin dropping to the ground one after another as they become trapped into her world, with entire cities losing their populations to the songs. Lucci reports this to the Gorosei, who had muted the live stream to avoid hearing her music and being affected, stating how given the massive worldwide success of the concert, if Utah isn't stopped, it's possible that in an hour from then up to 70% of the world's population would vanish away into Utah's world. The Gorosei are terrified by this, as it could veritably spell the collapse of society. Cutting to the castle with the Straw Hats, Chopper asks a pair of mice to guide them as they finally discover the archives. There, Robin begins to search for info, but a bunch of instrument-shaped golems left by the island's old inhabitants appear to stop the intruders from searching the forbidden contents of the archives. Robin is worried that she won't be able to look for info since she'll be too busy fighting, but Usopp tells her to trust in her crewmates to protect her, to which she happily agrees. Robin realizes there's a mural on the ceiling and realizes something. Meanwhile, in a cool action sequence, the Straw Hats fight off the golems, but Frankie finishes off with a radical beam giant slalom attack where he spins as he flies through the air, essentially blasting the entire cavern with his laser. The whole castle begins to collapse, as Frankie says "Super sorry dude," so the Straw Hats make their getaway. Nami and Robin are left behind, so Zeus tries to cover for them, but they are about to be crushed by rubble. Nami runs up to a mirror and starts screaming for Bruley, telling her that if they die, then she can say goodbye to ever escaping from the virtual world or seeing her family again. Bruley concedes because she wants to see Katakuri again and helps them get away right before the entire room collapses. Meanwhile, back at the main stage, still in the dream world, Saint Charlos appears before Utah, who came to the concert to take her back with him to marry Geoise because of her pretty voice. As soon as he appears, the entire audience bows before him in fear. Charlos offers to buy Utah for 1 billion belly, but Utah refuses, calling Charlos an old pathetic geezer who is part of the detestable celestial dragons, but offers him to join him in her new world as a normal person. Charlos snaps, so he orders his bodyguards shoot Utah down with their guns. Utah easily blocks the bullets with her powers as she laughs it off, but both bodyguards are shot down by Charlos, who calls them incompetent. Utah suddenly enters in shock and desperately tries fixing their wounds with her powers, being traumatized by the sight of blood. Charlos orders Marines around to capture her, and Utah is annoyed that the allies of justice would follow the orders of such a monster, but they say they have no choice. Utah then uses her powers to entrap Charlos and the bodyguards in a music sheet, just like she did before, and reassures the Marines and her entire audience that in this new era, they won't need to fear the celestial dragons anymore, as everyone will be equal. However, the audience grows concerned, feeling that Utah is basically just taking their place, which would be interesting given the potential connections of the Figureland family, and fear that the government will retaliate by sending an admiral, so several people want to start leaving. Kobe then appears on stage through Buenos Dias Doa no Mi. The audience is shocked to see that the hero who saved the people of Rocky Port has appeared, and Kobe explains to the audience how Utah's powers work and how she deceived them all. Utah tries to argue that she didn't deceive them, but some people are getting fed up with her. Utah tells him that they can't leave, that there's no point in leaving, because in her world they'll be happy forever and won't have to worry about work, studies, or anything else. With her powers, she can create unlimited food and anything else they want. However, while some agree with her, others in the crowd begin to boo Utah and say they want to leave. Some don't want a life of laziness where they don't work, others just want to go home to their families, and many just don't care about this new era and only liked UTA for her music. The audience begins arguing against each other, but Utah panics because this goes against her idea of peace and happiness. Utah finally begins to fall under the pressure and says that she realizes how she was wrong, and she simply has to force everyone to have more fun, drowning the stage in a deluge of water which turns anyone who touches it into chibi mascots and other cute items. The crowd desperately tries to avoid escaping the water, but they are all slowly turned chibi, including Saint Charlos. At Mary Geoise, the Gorosei panic at this sight and say that they need to get serious. Kobe and Bluno manage to escape the deluge last moment, but as they leap into the air door, Bluno is hit by the water and is turned chibi as well, though he manages to make it out, even if this form severely limits his powers by making his doors way smaller. Kobe and Bluno reconvene with Luffy and the Straw Hats, as well as Oven and Bruley once again, who discuss what they've learned and how they can stop UT. Robin mentions what she has found, explaining that the music sheet taught Musica serves as the vessel where the weapon known as the Devil King was trapped within. In ancient times, legend says that the negative emotions of people came together to form a demonic creature that people called the Devil King. Its power was so strong that it is very much capable of destroying the world, and Utah is the only one that can awaken this monster by singing the music on the sheet. Robin explains how the Devil King taught Musica exists in both planes, the real world and the virtual one. So if they defeat Tot Musica, that should make things unstable enough to undo the fruit's power and fuse both worlds back together, but this would require it to be attacked from both the virtual world and the real world at the same time. Everyone is concerned since there's not any particular allies they have in the real world at the moment, but Gordon appears with Bepo and says that they should have faith that Shanks will appear, and use that opportunity. Luffy asks Gordon about what happened with Shanks, but Gordon refuses to elaborate, so Luffy just leaps ahead and leaves into the forest to go fight Utah. Bardo panics, but Usopp says it's impossible to stop their captain, so they should just focus on making a plan. Yuta finds herself in the middle of the sea she's created, which has sunk most of Elijah Island. Despite it being water, she can walk on it. Luffy then appears before her and Yuta teases how Luffy lost again by doing her cute pose "you lost again," but Luffy isn't in the mood for jokes, so Yuta playfully begins to attack him as she says they'll settle things in one final duel. The two of them clash for a while as Luffy uses some moves like Gomu Gomu no Storm and then entering gear second, but he can't really bring himself to harm Yuta as he keeps missing her over and over. Yuta feels offended by him holding back and comes out on top by just generating water that weakens Luffy. Luffy falls to his knees debilitated by the water, and two music note knights put spears around his neck, imitating the pose of Gold D. Roger during his execution. Yuta asks Luffy why he is so desperate to become the Pirate King, only to end up with such a fate, but Luffy exclaims that it's for the sake of a new era. Yuta is irritated by this claim, grabbing Luffy's hat and pulling it apart. Luffy panics and begs Yuta to stop, but she keeps pulling as the hat is ripped in half. Luffy is furious, but says that even if he lost, he has faith that Shanks will come to help out. Yuta finds it pathetic that Luffy needs to be saved by Shanks, but Luffy says he wasn't talking about Shanks coming to save him, but coming to save Yuta, because there's no way that Shanks would just stand around if his daughter is suffering so much. Yuta is shaken by this claim, but tells Luffy how he's completely wrong, because Shanks will never come back. She reveals that despite the fact that she and Shanks are actually not related by blood, that she has always viewed him as her real father, which is what made his betrayal so painful. Yuta explains what really happened on Elijah 12 years ago. Shanks took Yuta to show her musical talent at Elijah, which marveled and astounded the people of the island due to her being a singing prodigy. Yuta really enjoyed herself there, so Shanks encouraged her to stay behind to learn music at the island's academy. Shanks mentioned how there is no peace or equality in this world, but that music can help deliver joy, something he legitimately believed Yuta was capable of doing in a new era. However, Yuta began crying, wanting to stay as the Red Hair Pirate's musician forever, as she'd much rather be with her family than studying somewhere she didn't know, so Shanks told her to forget about it and that they'll depart together tomorrow. However, Yuta woke up during the night and saw the entire island in flames. She ran out and found Gordon, who cursed the red-haired pirates for killing all on the island and plundering their beloved land. Yuta asked where Shanks was, but Gordon mentioned Shanks simply used Yuta's singing abilities to approach the island and then take advantage of a surprise attack to take Elegia's many famed riches and wealth. Refusing to believe this, Yuta ran to the shore only to see the Red Force in the distance and the red hair pirates partying on it all happy and peppy, not caring that they left Yuta behind. Heartbroken, Yuta broke down crying, but Gordon stopped her from jumping into the sea to go after them. After that, the tragedy ended up all over the newspapers, with Shanks identified as the suspect for pillaging the island and being given a bounty of 1,040,000,000 belly at the time, with his bounty poster showing him posing with his straw hat in retrospect. Cut back to the real world, Yuta is talking to a sleeping Luffy, at the same time that she is talking to the Luffy in the dream world. The real straw hat is still intact, since the one she broke is only the one in the dream world, but she places the real hat on top of the real world Luffy and pulls out a dagger. She lifts it up in the air, ready to take Luffy's life and stop his ambition to become Pirate King as she tells Luffy bye-bye. However, as she plunges the dagger down, it's stopped by a hand that grabs Yuta. As Yuta looks up, she asks, "What are you doing here?" To which the person replies, "I've come to hear my daughter singing." Shanks and his crew all stand in the rain smiling, while Yuta tries to hold back the tears. She, however, quickly begins to laugh maniacally as all the people who are sleeping gang up on the red hair pirates and start attacking them. Shanks, however, stays completely still and unfazed with the biggest Giga Chad face as the citizens can't even hurt him, simply looking at Yuta while confused. Howling Gab opens his mouth and a laser beam appears, but Beckman tells him to stop or he'll injure the civilians. Meanwhile, in the virtual world, Luffy realizes that Yuta has met Shanks by how she is reacting, but she gets really angry. However, right then Kobe appears and everyone charges in to fight Yuta. All the Straw Hats and the others try to attack her, but she manages to fend off their attacks with her powers fairly easily with a silent, angry look on her face. However, as Chopper distracts her, Law manages to find an opening and shambles her inside Bartolomeo's barrier, where she remains stuck inside. Bartolomeo soundproofs the barrier, turning it a golden color so that her voice can't get out either, and suddenly all her music note knights and all her effects outside the barrier are negated and vanish due to her voice being locked inside. Suddenly, in the real world, a Marine shoots a civilian and the red hair pirates realize the Marines are shooting down everyone to get to Yuta. Beckman asks Kizaru to show himself, and as Kizaru walks in, he says that while killing Yuta might trap all those in her virtual world forever, he's been given orders to still kill her, because that's still better odds than if Yuta summons Top Musica. since that might be it for the world if the Devil King is awakened. Yuta snaps at the person who has been shot, just like she did with Charlos, and tries to do what she can to stop the man's wound, ripping off her sleeve to stop the bleeding. But since this isn't her virtual world, she can't do anything to heal him. However, Hongo, the doctor of the red-haired pirates, comes in and helps her heal the wound. Kizaru tries to take advantage of the situation and leaps into the air to attack with Yasukani no Magatama, but Shanks instantly nullifies the attack with one swing of his sword. Kizaru shows a scared expression for a second as Shanks suddenly leaps towards him. Kizaru tries to shoot another Yasukani no Magatama, but Shanks pushes away every single laser beam with his sword, cutting in half one of the stage mountain's spires in the process. Kizaru moves away at light speed, but as soon as he reforms, Shanks has already hunted him down and has his sword on Kizaru's neck, asking him to not step into his family troubles. Kizaru stands completely still and raises his arms in apology. Fujitora approaches Shanks with sword in hand. In the dream world, Yuta is on the verge of a mental breakdown, slamming the barrier, stating how she wishes she had the courage to pull the trigger earlier. She stops and pulls out the top musica sheet. It's time to awaken the ancient Devil King. Yuta begins dropping some 6 Sawano beats that are so incredibly powerful they instantly shatter even Bartolomeo's barrier, shocking him that something exists that can do that. The outfits of everyone present in the dream world change into battle attire thanks to Yuta's powers, transforming the straw hats and the others into their second gear for the film. Meanwhile, in the real world, Kizaru once again tries to attack, but Beckman puts a rifle up against him, to which Kizaru raises his arms in a very delightful callback. Kizaru comments how ironic it is that it's pirates protecting civilians from the Marines, but mentions how at this point that Tot Musica has been unleashed. It's basically pointless to fight back Yuta's powers. At Mary Geoise, Lucci tries to cut off the broadcast so the Gorosei won't be affected, but they mention how now that Tot Musica has been awakened, it won't make a difference, as both planes are fusing together. The Devil King appears from the ground, appearing in both the real world and the virtual world. Around its chest are 3 skulls, those found around Orz's waist, who is also called the Devil fittingly enough, while its arms are basically piano keys stitched together. Its hair is pure white, just like that of a Lunarian Gear 5D Sulong, and has an X-shaped scar over its left eye. Yuta herself transforms, and her wings also become black like those of a Lunarian. Shanks leaps in to attack the Devil King, but even his powerful attacks simply bounce off of it, being pushed back. Shanks lands on a tower where Khalifa is standing, and Khalifa mentions to him how the only way to really hurt the Devil King is to attack it from both planes, which may prove difficult. Meanwhile, in the virtual world, everyone begins attacking, but Luffy stands still as he stares down at Yuta. They try their best to attack the monster, but their attacks all prove fruitless, as not even Zoro or Law can lay any real damage on it. Luffy finally attempts to attack as well as he goes Gear 3rd, but as he unleashes Elephant Gatling, he too is unable to do much. Usopp is hit as the Devil King bounces his attack back at him, falling on the ground. Luffy worries, but Usopp tells him to leave it to them and to just focus on Utea. Luffy leaps towards her and tries begging Utea to listen to him, refusing to attack her. Law gets mad at Luffy and tells him to just strike her, but Luffy stands his ground. Yuta summons her spear from the Watashi wa Saikyo musical number and sends it flying to pierce through Luffy. However, at the last second, Gordon jumps in the way and gets stabbed in Luffy's place. Gordon tears up and mentions how he doesn't want to see Yuti falling to the level of killing one of the people she's closest to, and that Yuta has it all wrong, as she's been a victim of a lie he's guilty of. He reveals the truth of what really happened all that time ago, as when Yuta and Shanks were invited to the party after her performance, Yuta found the music sheet of Top Musica lying around. Gordon mentions that the Devil King residing within the music sheet possesses a will of its own of sorts, which is very reminiscent of what the Gorosei said of Zoan devil fruits. Interesting, because of the devil connection, and used it to be helped to escape from the archives and be led all the way to Yuta through its will so that she could unleash itself upon the world. As such, Yuta naively sang this music sheet she found at the party, unknowing that she just unleashed the weapon that is the Devil King upon the world. Tot Musica took over Yuta's body to wreak havoc on the island, wiping away its entire population in a matter of instants. We see the true power of an ancient weapon of this capacity as the Devil King blasted lasers that destroyed dozens of buildings in a second, killing countless people in an instant. The citizens, screaming in horror, mentioned that Yuta would end up destroying the world. The red-haired pirates, however, fought back, with all of them including Monster charging towards the Devil King. Shanks leaped into the air and used a powerful attack to pierce through the Devil King's chest while flying. Because of Yuta's still young body and weak endurance at the moment, the weakened Devil King was overwhelmed by Shanks' strong attack and was fragile enough to be sealed again within the music sheet. As Gordon, the only survivor, was saved by the red-haired pirate's Dr. Hongo, Shanks asked him to never tell Yuta the truth because it would be too much for her. He also asked Gordon to take care of Utah and become her foster father, because Shanks believed it would be too dangerous now for her to sail with them anymore, as if the Marines found out that she was the one who unleashed this weapon, then she would be hunted down by the government, which is why he needed to cut away any connections with her so that they wouldn't find out what really happened on the island. He also decided to take the blame for destroying the island, to take away attention from Utah and cover up the incident, which they successfully managed to do. Gordon agreed to keep the secret and play his part, vowing to help raise Utah to become the best singer she can be on Shanks's request. As Utah desperately cried to Shanks's crew leaving, we find out that when the red-haired pirates were partying as they left, they were in reality crying overcome with sadness, but tried to hide their tears because they wanted Utah to forget about them and move on, rather having her believe that they betrayed her than her finding out about the horrible things she committed. Back to the present, while Law begins tending to Gordon, Luffy says that there is no more need for Utah to do any of this because Shanks did in fact care about her as he reaches his hand towards her. Utah, however, is still emotionally confused and seizes Luffy by reaching out her hand and attacking him. However, Luffy notices the motif drawn on her hand sleeve. Luffy recognizes that it's a drawing that he made for her when they were children, which, as we see in a flashback, was a very crudely drawn version of Shanks's straw hat given Luffy's poor drawing skills, that Luffy proposed to her to make it the symbol of the new era. Utah begins recalling those happy memories together from long ago when they acted like siblings and is emotionally confused, but Luffy tells her more than anyone else, "You know very well this isn't true joy. This isn't the new era." Utah begins to tear up, calling out Luffy's name. However, she is engulfed in music notes, as her body is absorbed into Tot Musica. Robin notes it's too late, as the Devil King is now consuming Utah to gain strength. At this point, it becomes evident Tot Musica won't be defeated as easily as Shanks did back 12 years ago. The Devil King begins to transform even further into its final form and sprouts a pair of Lunarian black wings on its back. The skulls on its chest become 5, and it becomes gigantic. Trapped within Tot Musica, Utah, overwhelmed by her emotions, recalls how she found a recording of what happened on the island that night just recently around a year ago, finding out the truth that Gordon hid from her. But after all those years of hating Shanks, she couldn't bring herself to change, and she was already so influenced by all the comments she kept receiving from her viewers that she couldn't stop her plans for this new era, as she felt it's what her viewers asked no, demanded of her. The entire area around everyone changes and becomes like space, both in the virtual world and the real world, allowing everyone to float in the air just like space. The Devil King gets ready to consume everyone, easily destroying several of the marine battleships like butter, posing it no threat. Broly is almost hit by an attack, but Sanji protects her, telling her how he'll always come to a lady's defense, to which Broly blushes and tells her to be careful since she's key to their plan. Luffy is knocked away by the Devil King's transformation and falls unconscious, his eyes turning black just like he did when he was defeated by Kaido. However, the Straw Hats aren't willing to go down without a fight, so Nami asks Kobe for guidance. It turns out Kobe is seemingly a really good battle strategist, as he commands everyone with his excellent tactical abilities. Broly is instructed to help evacuate all the Chibified citizens through her Miro world, with Nami and Robin guiding them to her and Bepo, Bluno, and Sunny covering her. The rest of the Straw Hats are instructed to cover the flanks, with Chopper guarding Luffy and Gordon, Usopp firing from the back, and Zoro, Law, and Oven leading the charge. Everyone gets in formation as they prepare their offense, and they all leap to attack on Kobe's command. They all charge in and begin to attack the Devil King. Epic final boss piano music begins to play. However, they still can't deal much damage. Luffy regains consciousness and throws away his coat, turning into Gear 4th, ready for battle. Gordon pleads him to save Utah, stating that while Utah's music may very well be capable of destroying the world, in the right hands, it could also legitimately save it and bring joy to everybody. Meanwhile, in the real world, Shanks alone is fending off Tot Musica, but isn't able to deal much damage either, as it is hard to coordinate. Some Music Note Knights try to attack Shanks but are hit by blocks of mochi. Katakuri appears behind Shanks, and when Shanks inquires about what Big Mom's son is doing here, he says he'll lend him a hand since he wants to save his sister. Katakuri mentions how really good observation haki can allow someone to briefly peer into the virtual world, which they can use to synchronize their attacks. Shanks thanks him for the info but tells Katakuri he isn't the only one with such a skill for observation haki there, looking at Yasopp. From within the virtual world, Luffy gets ready to attack but he suddenly feels a presence and exclaims Shanks. In the real world, Shanks also notices Luffy and encourages him to attack together. At the same time, Usopp tries to use his observation haki, but he suddenly hears a voice in his head. Yasopp mentions how you finally realized dumb son and explains to him how they can use both of their really good observation haki to coordinate attacks between the real world and the virtual world so that Top Musica can be brought down. Usopp is overcome with joy to hear his father and gets ready to fight by his side. It's time for the final battle, as an orchestral remix of Shin Jidai begins playing at unison. Luffy and Shanks say, "Men, let's do this." Shanks raises his sword as it is enveloped in what look like flames. On Usopp and Yasopp's command, the Straw Hats and Red Hair Pirates begin their final offense. Kobe opens up with a kick and Zoro jumps ahead and coats his swords in Advanced Conqueror's haki, which looks like green flames. Together with Beckman shooting with his rifle, they strike Top Musica together, with Zoro entering Q-Toryu 9-sword style mode and destroying one of its limbs. Next, Jinbe and Lucky Rooks attack together, with Jinbe throwing a wave attack with Helmeppo's help and Ongo throwing Lucky Rooks like a spinning bowling ball, destroying another limb. Howling Gab and Sanji attack together, with Oven casting fire onto Sanji, helping him turn his legs flames blue as he enters Ifrit Jambi. Together with Katakuri and Howling Gab using his pacifista-like laser, Sanji strikes Top Musica and destroys another limb. Robin and Chopper attack together with Bonk Punch and Monster, with Robin entering Gigante Fleur, the move she used against Black Maria to propel Chopper. Nami unleashes Zeus Breeze Tempo alongside Lime Juice, while Brook attacks with Rockstar. All the Straw Hats keep attacking together with the red-haired pirates, hitting critical parts of Top Musica's body and destroying away its arms and legs. Finally, Usopp and Yasopp combine and shoot Top Musica, who tries to block the attack but is stopped by Frankie and Building Snake, who attacks by spinning like a screw, allowing Usopp and Yasopp's attack to land. All of the Devil King's limbs are now gone, leaving Luffy and Shanks to come together for one final attack. Luffy enters Snakeman and the Devil King tries to hunt him down with its lasers, but Luffy keeps evading and charging up his attack. The two rush ahead, but as they are overwhelmed by a blast from Top Musica, Shanks remembers a moment from the past. A piano piece of Shin Jidai plays 19 years ago. When Shanks was still 20, he raided a pirate ship with his crew. Among the loot from the ship, he found a treasure chest but heard something from within it. Inside was a young baby, being a 2-year-old Utah. It turns out her parents were killed by the pirates they had just raided, who had kidnapped her. Utah started to loudly cry, so Shanks tried to make Utah stop crying and had the idea to start singing a song, despite the fact he is terrible at it. However, in spite of how bad Shanks' singing was, after hearing that music, she laughed. Shanks was shocked by this, as he thought back to the past, with the scene shifting to God Valley. There, 38 years ago, Roger, Rayleigh, and Gayban, seemingly leaving the island in a ship, looked into a treasure chest they plundered from the island, and inside found a red-haired baby, Shanks at age 1, with a note with his name on it. Shanks thought back at the similarities between how Roger found and adopted him and how he found Utah, that he realized, could this be the work of fate? Back to the present, Luffy and Shanks are emotionally overwhelmed by their memories together with Utah and push forward in order to save her. The two of them charge towards Top Musica, but Luffy's Snakeman isn't enough. However, suddenly, pushed to the brink, Luffy's eyebrows change as he begins to morph and his hair and clothes turn pure white. Luffy enters Gear 5th and readies a massive attack, while Shanks unleashes a massively powerful Advanced Conqueror's haki attack that coats his blade in a powerful aura. Both planes fuse together and side by side. Shanks and Luffy stand together as they shoot their attacks. Luffy's attack takes the shape of a lion, and Shanks is the shape of a hawk. The two attacks combine and fuse together as they take the form of a Griffon. The Griffon charges forward and envelops Top Musica, who receives the full blunt of the attack and is overwhelmed, causing it to explode as it lets out a devilish shriek, finally ending the fight. Everyone rejoices, only to realize that they somehow aren't returning to the real world. Those in the real world are also concerned, with Katakuri being attacked by Brule, who is incredibly agile as it turns out, as those sleeping are rampaging about hurting each other. Robin realizes Top Musica becoming so strong resulted in the two planes remaining divided. Utah is now in Shanks' arms and Shanks gives her some medicine that Hongo brought to help her sleep. Utah, however, tosses the medicine away as it smashes on the ground and says that if she falls asleep, then Top Musica's influence will still keep them trapped in the virtual world, and how the only way to free them now is to use her powers. Shanks grits his teeth, but agrees to her choice. She tries to walk up to the stage but struggles, so Shanks helps her up. In a beautiful scene, Utah prepares to sing as she starts to chant Sekai no Tsuzuki, the world's continuation. Her song reaches into the virtual world, embracing everyone in a beautiful golden light as they calmly fall asleep with smiles on their faces in the light of a shining sun. Monster brings out a Den Den Mushi in front of Utah, which connects to the broadcast that was going on, releasing everyone all around the world from the virtual world as well. Brule returns to her body and falls asleep into Katakuri's arms with a smile on her face, who embraces her. As everyone peacefully falls asleep to the beautiful sound of Utah's singing voice, their consciousnesses return to their bodies, though they'll remain asleep for a little bit before waking up. Little by little, the world is restored to normal. Finally, as things are resolved, Shanks stands with Utah in his arms with the straw hats still sleeping around him. Utah thanks Shanks for coming after her despite her not believing in him. However, their reunion is cut short by the Marines, who all aim their weapons and surround them. The red hair pirates get in battle formation to fight against the Marines, but Shanks simply says that Utah is his daughter, that she is precious family. As Utah breaks into tears, Shanks proudly proclaims that he will not let anyone lay a hand on his daughter, unleashing a massive conqueror's haki blast that shakes the entire sea and creates waves. His blast knocks out every single Marine outside of the admirals, even vice admirals as Kizaru points out, with only Momonga resisting among them as he collapses to his knees and barely holds on. Kizaru begins to profusely sweat and Fujitora retreats his sword, saying it would be foolish to start what would be a war with so many civilians around. The two admirals decide to retreat as every single Marine ship remaining quickly leaves. Khalifa, overlooking the arena, also decides to leave. Everyone can finally breathe easy, but as Utah is glad that everything was resolved, she collapses in Shanks' arms. Shanks tells Utah not to worry, because the real new era is almost here. With her final strength and a crippling voice, Utah sings Kazno Yuki, Where the Wind Blows, as a farewell to her family and crew, with Shanks trying to hold his tears back as her voice begins to fade from her body. Luffy regains consciousness in his dreams. In front of him is Utah. Utah asks Luffy why he kept holding back against punching her, but Luffy says it's because, just like he told her when they were younger, his punch is as strong as a pistol. Utah laughs and jokes around about losing another duel, doing one final time her cute pose with her hands saying, "I lost again." Luffy, however, stays silent given what happened and sits down. Utah gets more serious and apologizes for everything she's done and brings out Luffy's straw hat within the dream world, fixing it back. She mentions how this hat is important to her too, and as she approaches Luffy and puts it on his head, she tells him that one day that hat will suit him better than any before him. She gets close to Luffy, but the scene cuts as Luffy wakes up. Luffy realizes he is on the deck of the Sunny, already leaving Elijah Island. Most of the straw hats are asleep, though Jinbe, Frankie, and Zoro are awake, the latter drinking from a bottle of sake. Luffy asks Zoro where Shanks went, but Zoro points out to the side of the ship with the bottle. Luffy gets up and looks ahead at the sea, where he can see the Red Force. There he sees Shanks and the red hair pirates, who are all gathered around a casket with their flag on top of it, implicitly holding Utah's funeral. Luffy's expression turns grim as he lowers his hat to cover his eyes. He and Shanks turn facing their backs on each other, as they somberly depart ways, silently saying goodbye to the girl that influenced their lives and dreams so much. In a post-credits scene, Luffy is sitting on top of the Sunny's figurehead with a somber expression. He taps on top of the Sunny's head and tries talking to it, but the Sunny doesn't reply back. Luffy thinks back and recalls Utah smiling at him with his straw hat in her hands, implicitly being from the last sequence where they spoke together in dreams, as she says some words, but the words are purposefully muted out so that we can't hear what she's saying, keeping her final words a mystery from the audience. After recalling this, Luffy then smiles and raises his hands in the air. He takes in a deep breath and exclaims, "Kaizoku Aoyanai or wa Naru."